You called me Valkyria, and I think that's a good starting point for me, because you placed me in a geography, in a history, in a cultural history. And that's where I like to start, in Europe, in the European tradition. Because when I was asked to read the essay of Niels, where he made the juxtaposition or the conflict between the autonomy of art and, let's say, the consequences of the Muhammad caricatures. That this is a question asked from a place and from a time. The possible that the two excludes each other, that art has to be autonomous, and if it concedes, if it lets society ask, if it lets society react, it loses its autonomy. I think this way of asking a question is a European tradition. And you refer to Mallarmé, and I think it's above all a French tradition that is very strong in Denmark, stronger than in Norway. So I think the question points to its time and place as a kind of provincial question. It's provincial. I don't think it is necessarily universal. I don't think it's the same question you would ask in Sudan, in Indonesia, in Uruguay, necessarily. That's my first point. And I think the autonomy of art after the Muhammad caricatures, the autonomy of art as an idea, we conceive it as universal, but let's say it's a European tradition. The autonomy of art, of course, has been changed and has been challenged. So we agree on that. And I think that the autonomy of art is a necessity. And it's necessary as an idea and as a myth and as a kind of utopia. And we have to consider it as a kind of utopia. And as a myth and as a utopia, it has to be challenged all the time. If not, the autonomy of art or the art will be corrupted from inside and consume itself from within. So when the autonomy of art is total and absolute, the art is in total conformity with itself, and then we have a complete status quo. When autonomy of art is taken for granted, the society that takes it for granted exists within a kind of bell jar, glasklokke. It is isolated from the rest of us, from the rest of the world. It doesn't ask, is it anybody out there? So this has been shown to us through the case of Denmark. The world is here. The autonomy of art is challenged. You send out a message and you are not longer inside the bell jar. You are out there in the world. The internet is there. So today I think the autonomy of art is challenged by all the new ways of communications. It's challenged by the fact that we can no longer be in our bell jar, in our province. But it has always to be there as a necessity, as something necessary. It will always be challenged when exposed to what is outside the autonomous art, and it must be challenged. And the artist will always challenge the borders, let us call it that, for the autonomous republic of art. The artist is placed in the force field the generator, the force field, Kraftwerk, between the center and the border of the autonomous Republic of Art. And he is caught between the seduction and resistance, both to what is autonomous and to what is not. Look at the art made on commission, for example. And now I will go back a bit in European history. The paintings made on commission by Velázquez and by Goya. They challenge the autonomy of art, they challenge the conception of art, but it is made on commission. They exist in the force field, they are drawn between seduction and resistance. And look at the anti-fascist and anti-war avant-garde poetry. I personally worked a lot with César Vallejo. I mean, he's both the most avant-garde and the most politically challenging. So these things won't exclude each other. The most politically challenging is also often the most artistically challenging. So I think there's a great tradition of anti-imperialistic experimental poetry. It's both and, it's not neither or. And it's a particularly Norwegian tradition that it has to be either this or that. Either you are committed or you are experimental. But there are big traditions out there that are not like that. They combine it, it's both this and that. So I think it's, and look at the poetry that Lorca wrote in '29 when the stock exchange crashed in New York. He was there writing about it, writing about what capitalism did to people, and writing about the people in Harlem, how they lived, and what other forces they had to meet this crack on the stock exchange. It's the most avant-garde poetry you could read. It was written in '29. And I think it's in this, challenging its own borders and at the same time being drawn between the borders and the center that art is. And that art kind of plugs in. It turns something on and it gets connected. It gets connected to us as a public. So one need not to become a Gorky to Stalin. I mean, that's the obvious case of the necessity of the autonomies of art. But I think today the question mainly we have to ask ourselves is how do the autonomy of art meet with the place we are in the world today, communicating with the rest of the world also. And the caricatures there are interesting, but it's also another discussion. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that you very interestingly rephrased the question and almost rewritten it for us. So we have to take it up again when we get back to you, Niels. You'll have a chance.